Kathy, if you want to go ahead and begin, we are live.
Awesome. Yeah, so I am Kathy Beery. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia. I'd like to welcome you all here, and I know there are lots of people who are going to be jumping on here in just a few minutes. So I'd first like to thank the people who have helped sponsor this town hall, REA, CEA, and FEA, all affiliates of Virginia Education Association. And we'd like to welcome you to the July 12th, 2020 VEU Safe Return to Schools Town Hall. Slide. Okay, so just some general meeting stuff. Make sure that you're on mute, which I think everybody is. And it looks like everybody knows how to use chat for comments and concerns. When we get to the end, and we have our Q&A. Instead of using the raise your hand button, it's a lot easier just to write SAC in the chat, and that way we know that you have a comment or question. Slide. Okay, so VEU, Virginia Educators United, is a grassroots coalition, and we were built by educators, parents, and community members. And when we formed just over 2 years ago, we organized the Red for Ed March to the Capitol Steps in Richmond. It brought over 4,000 people together. According to the media, it was the largest gathering since suffragettes, which is a long time to have that many people there. Without that solidarity, we would not have had that 5% salary increase. We also advocate for highly qualified, experienced educators. We support changes to the state. Sorry, I'm using my cheat sheet. We support changes to the state policies to have more equitable learning environments for our students. Slide. Okay, so we have a little bit of an interactive thing that we can do to let people know where we are in our state. So in the chat, people have already been telling us where they were from and what their role or district is. On the next slide, well, right now, what you can do is you're going to go to the view options, pull down, choose annotate, select the heart stamp. And then on the next slide, hold on, don't put your hearts on the state yet. On the next slide, you will be able to put where you are from with your little heart stamp. So we'll give you a second for you guys to see and figure out where the annotate button is, and then just hang on for a second till we switch to the next slide. All right, I think everybody's kind of getting that. So next slide. There we go. All right, so now you can start putting in where you are from. It looks like we have representation from just about all over the state. That's awesome. You guys rock. I'll give you just another couple of seconds, and then we're going to go to the next slide, but just about 10 more seconds. Okay, We're going to go ahead and move on. You guys, this is amazing. This is awesome. Okay, next slide, please.
We will clear this.
Let me
page.
clear this. I got this.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of the things about coding. Okay, so before we can talk about returning to school, to in-person learning, we need to demand that 100% is continued distant learning until we see 24 days of a consistent decline in new COVID cases in our communities. And we are not there. And we need to demand and make sure that we are guaranteed a fully funded reopening plan. At this point, we do not have the dollars for reopening safely. Next slide. And Emma. Emma, you gotta unmute.
Sorry, I was still in annotate mode, so I was putting a heart on my mute button and unsuccessfully unmuting. So, hi, I'm Emma Clark. I'm a teacher in Chesterfield County, and
Emma, are you there? Emma, I think you're back on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry. A little bit of challenge there. Okay. So I just want to talk about a little bit more details about what Kathy was introducing, which is what does it mean for us when we use this hashtag only when it's safe? So to be more specific, only when it's safe for us means that we've seen 24 days straight where we have a downward trajectory in COVID-19 cases and near zero incidence of new documented cases and hospitalizations. At that point, we feel like we're on the right track. The other thing that has to be in place is we have to know that when we return, we're not going to cause a spike with our return to school. We're going to have the things in place that we need to maintain that downward trajectory. So that includes personal protective equipment like masks and face shields, adequate supplies for cleaning, the different protocols that we need established by our districts. And we know it's going to be crucial. We're going to have to hire some extra positions to do screening, to do enhanced cleaning of our buildings. And we can't have a situation where we just try to layer that on top of the existing employees like ourselves in the classroom, if we want it to be able to be done right and to be fair to everybody in the school building. In addition to that, we're committed to fighting for effective distance learning. We don't know how long distance learning is going to need to be in place, but what we do know is that distance learning requires people to be home from work at times, to be with their kids and to help guide them through that learning. It's going to require healthcare, and it's going to require a lot of assistance in terms of rent forgiveness and mortgage forbearance, paid family leave, an extension of the unemployment benefits we've seen so that people can not be put in the position of choosing between having a job and taking care of their kids. Next slide. So to orient ourselves in the timeline of what's happened so far, our first case was announced here in Virginia on the 7th of March. Shortly after that, the governor declared a state of emergency. We moved to the executive order, which closed the school buildings, although not school itself, on the 23rd. And then we issued the stay-at-home order on the 30th. Next slide. So where are we right now? How are we doing as a state? Right now, we have over 70,000 cases. We have, if I can move for just a moment, 6,744 hospitalizations, and we've lost almost 2,000 people in the state of Virginia to this to COVID-19. We have seen 39 outbreaks since July 5th. So, we're in the midst of phase 3. We're hoping to see a downward trend, but as of right now, 39 outbreaks does not mean 39 new individual cases. An outbreak is a group of people. So for example, an outbreak at a, retirement facility where we've seen, a large number of cases, that would be considered one outbreak, but might have, let's say, 20 people who have contracted the illness. So 39 outbreaks since July 5th. Since entering phase 3 of reopening, we've seen a 10% increase in hospitalizations. And we're only in week 2 of phase 3. So we know that there's a lag time between people getting sick and us being able to identify who has gotten sick. That's, 7 to 14, or sorry, rather around 14 days. So we're still trying to get a handle on how we're doing during phase 3, but we are trending upwards. It's important to note, and this isn't something that we have, successfully or even come close to really addressing as a state, that this COVID-19 is disproportionately disproportionately harming communities of color in Virginia. So, for example, Latinos make up just 10% of our populations, but they're 45% of cases and 11% of deaths. Similarly, for African Americans, they are only 20% of the state of Virginia, but 35% of overall deaths to COVID-19 are African Americans. So this has had an extremely harmful impact on those communities especially, and we have a responsibility and an obligation as a state to get to the bottom of that and to address the causes of that. 7,431 cases overall are children who are school age. So we have this conception that this is an illness that doesn't affect children, that, they don't get it as easily, they don't spread it as easily, it's not as harmful to them. But actually over 10% of the total number of cases in Virginia are school age children. And that's at a time when schools are closed. So we can only imagine that it's very possible that that number would go up significantly if we were to reopen school. Next slide. So we just wanted to throw out a few of the headlines that we've seen, for example, just in the last couple of weeks, talking about things that we're learning about coronavirus. We are seeing a potential mutation that may allow for the virus to spread more easily, or it may not. We're still trying to figure that out. The CDC says that 40% of COVID-19 patients are asymptomatic, and that 50% of transmissions occur when that person is asymptomatic. So what this kind of means, those numbers, is that we're thinking that really all of the transmission that's happening is very hard to track just by asking people who have symptoms to self-quarantine, because many of them are asymptomatic. We're seeing some really concerning science come out about potential long-term harmful impacts of COVID-19 for adults as well as children. So for adults, we're picking up on neurological problems, strokes, brain inflammation, nerve damage. And for children, we've seen around 300 cases of kids who have come, who were previously healthy, contracted COVID-19, and then ended up having severe inflammation affecting multiple organ systems. So, and also women who are pregnant, we're seeing that become a something that we're learning a lot about, that it may be more dangerous or easier for pregnant women to contract the illness and contract a more severe case of COVID-19. So what this all goes to show basically is that there's still a lot we don't know about how this virus spreads, who it affects, and how dangerous it really is. So as the federal government is pushing from the presidency to reopen schools, Experts in the CDC are actually warning that that's the highest risk thing that we can do in terms of spreading it through school-age children and through that community. Next slide. So what has our governor's response been? On June 9th, he made the announcement of his original response to the COVID-19 crisis. So he proposed a 3-phase approach. In this approach, phase 1 would be mostly virtual, but he emphasized that he believed that most schools could be in phase 2 right away. So phase 2 would allow for students in pre-K through 3rd grade to attend school, as well as English language learners and students with learning disabilities would all be in school. And phase 3 would have all children back in school buildings with masks and social distancing. So we won't go into too many of the details at this point, but later we're going to talk about some of the challenges that are presented by that proposal. On July 10th, just recently, I'm sure we all saw that the governor announced that given that we seem to be not doing so well in phase 3 as we had hoped, if we cannot remain in phase 3, if we have to backtrack, then those guidelines about reopening school buildings might have to change. Next slide.
Summer. Summer, can you unmute yourself
Thank
now?
you. Yes, I'm now can unmute. Hello, I'm Summer Schultz. I'm in Richmond. And what we're going to be looking at next is how some of these state level things and federal level things apply to us. This first slide here is looking at the plans that came from the federal level for state reopening. The CDC had developed this detailed document on state reopening. A lot of us have seen that in various forms online. This was rejected basically by the federal administration as being too specific. They released instead what you're seeing here on your screen. This is the gatekeeping beginning of the opening up America again plan for states. And these are the things that the White House felt that states would need to have before they could start any phased in reopening process. If you take a look here, these things are all based on things off to the left, talking about symptoms being reduced in a community, cases being reduced in a community, and hospitals having the support that they needed. The problem is, this is very reliant on testing being available to know that we have cases or do not have cases. As we've known, that continues to be a huge problem in much of America. And the other problem is most states in the United States did not even meet these gatekeeping criteria here before they started going ahead with their phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 opening plans. Another issue is state by state by state had different ideas of what their own phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 opening plans would look like. And as Emma said, Virginia is now entering Virginia's phase 3 of our opening plan. Next slide, please. This is also from the CDC. She had referenced the idea that the CDC had talked about the idea of the highest risk. And if you look here, we have the lower risk going to higher risk, lower risk being virtual classes, the medium risk being some sort of a combination or being something like small in-person classes with lots of modifications, and the highest risk would be reopening, going back to campus, everyone back on campus. As you have experienced, just like the state opening plans, the school opening plans have had a lot of confusion, a lot of mixed messaging, and a lot of politicization of this whole process. What I'd like to ask here is, we know this already, that the lowest risk is to stay virtual, the highest risk is to return to school. We know that there's other things that are very low risk or very high risk when it comes to COVID. What level of risk are we willing to choose for ourselves, our students, our communities, our families? if everything else were equal. In other words, if the economics were taken out of the picture, will we still be choosing to do this very high risk return to school? Or will we be choosing the lowest risk for our people? Let's go to the next slide. This is also from the CDC. This is from the link down at the bottom. You guys will have these slides and you can go visit all of these primary sources later. But this is the decision tree that the CDC put out for deciding to open up schools. And this is based on levels of community transmission, how rapidly COVID is going through the community. The first level is no transmission, that's over on the left. And what we've blown up over here on the right is if there is moderate and mild or severe levels of community transmission. And if you look at what they're saying needs to be done when there is an increase getting into that severe level, is that we need to implement multiple distancing strategies and have extended school dismissals and looking at ways to accommodate needs of anybody who is at a high risk. The CDC isn't saying these things are feasible, these multiple distancing strategies, et cetera, et cetera. They're saying these things are needed to safely be in the building. Another thing that we have all probably seen and dug through and talked about constantly online with each other is that list of things that the schools need to be open based on the CDC's guidance. Things like 6 foot of distancing, the masks for everyone, the things about the partitions and students sitting on staggered bus seats, all of those things. And there's been lots of discussion in the teacher community about whether those things are possible or not. It's not the CDC's job to say that these things are possible and you can do them. The CDC's job is to say these things must be done to safely be in the building together. That leaves it to be our job to say yes, and we cannot do them. Next slide, please. We have a guest speaker who's going to be our first speaker here tonight, who is Dr. Jess Hester. He's going to be talking specifically about some of the science behind the spread of COVID-19 and looking at the types of problems that are specific to communities like schools. Let me do an introduction of him here. He's an astrophysicist. He's spent his career working on projects like the Hubble Space Telescope. And he's looked at the benefit of public education in a lot of his work. He's going to be giving us a perspective on the difficult question of what education is going to have to look like in this time of COVID-19. So I'd like to welcome him. I'm hoping he's in the stands here, and let him tell us what he can based on the information that we're seeing now about the spread of COVID.
All right, I'm up here somewhere in the cheap seats, and
Okay.
hopefully, let me see if my screen share works. Do I want to continue? Yes, I want to continue, and I want to do this. All right. Okay, so do people see my screen? Hopefully. Nods, yes, no, thumbs up. Okay. First of all, it is a pleasure to be here. I care passionately about this stuff, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in what you're doing. When I spoke to the Fairfield group last week, I said, you know, you guys in Virginia are looking at your numbers and you think you're okay, but I'm pretty sure you're in bad shape already. And just to see what happened, you know, there is a prediction that has been confirmed by data. So I want to talk a bit about what's going on and what you guys are really facing. Before I do, though, I want to point out 2 things. The first is that right now, COVID is making the only rules that matter. Presidents, vice presidents, governors, school board members can say whatever the heck they want to say, and COVID doesn't care. And so ultimately what everybody is going to have to deal with, in particular you guys, is the virus, because that's the only thing that matters. There's a lot of hot air, but that's all it is. The other thing is to realize that the only place that normal exists anymore is in our memories and our dreams. Normal's gone. We are not talking about trying to get back to normal. We are talking about figuring out what the future looks like. And so as you go forward, think about that. Now, yesterday I spoke to a group in California, and I want to start here by talking a little bit about what's going on there. First thing that you need to know when you look at COVID is that there's a 2.5, 3-week delay between when somebody is infected and when the case is actually confirmed. And I talked to the Fairfax group last week about that. So for example, here in the case of California, we have, here are the observed cases, and here are when the infections actually took place. So when you look at what's going on, you actually have to look at when the infections are happening. So for example, if you look in California, there are some breaks where clearly things changed. And if you go back and look at dates, well, that break is when the shelter in place orders went into effect. We saw the effect not until here, but it actually happened there. Here was where stage 2 reopening was. People said, hey, stage 2 reopening, nothing changed. Well, that's not true. Infections started going up. You just hadn't seen the change yet. Stage 3 reopening, people said, hey, we got through stage 3 reopening, no problem. Well, no, again, what happened was at stage 3 reopening, cases started skyrocketing and you just didn't see it for a couple of weeks. You see this everywhere that you look. I mean, I'm not even going to show Arizona because Arizona is so bad that I'm tired of showing it. But let's look at Florida. Florida was cruising along here. Again, the blue line is the line that shows the reported cases. And they were cruising along and they said, we're going to do our phase 1 reopening, and nothing changed. And they said, oh, that's great. We're going to do our phase 2 reopening. And sure enough, after phase 2 reopening, stuff started going up. They missed the point. If you actually look at what was happening at their phase 1 reopening, infections immediately started climbing, so that by the time they did their phase 2 reopening, they were already in trouble. Texas, same thing, you get the picture. You look at where the infections are and you say, what happened? And across the country, you look, boom, there it is. They reopened, infections went up. Boom, there it is. They reopened and infections went up. With that in mind, let's look at Virginia. Here we've got the last little bit in Virginia. And here are the confirmed cases. Okay. And then you take those back about 2.5 weeks and you see where the infections were occurring. So if we look at where the infections were occurring, let's see what was happening. Infections were falling beautifully until your phase 1 reopening in the north, which is all the people are, at which point the number of infections stopped falling and they were cruising along like that. But when people looked at it, they thought, oh, look at that. Our cases are still falling. This is great. This would be a wonderful time to do phase 2. As soon as they did phase 2, sure enough, the cases started going up, which are the cases that you're finally seeing today. But it looked like they did phase 2 and everything was fine for a long time. You're still going up from phase 2. But then before you had even seen the effects of phase 2, you decided now would be a great time to go to phase 3. So what do you suppose is going to happen here when you go to phase 3? That's going to happen. And so you guys are in worse shape than you think you are. Oh, this is just showing what the testing is doing, showing that testing, it's not like there's more testing that's popping up here or anything like that. Here's the reality that you face. You have not even begun to see the consequences of phase 3. You have only started to see the consequences of phase 2. And so if your state goes like every other state has gone, I would not be surprised if a week from now we're going to start reading about how Virginia is the next outbreak, or at least one of the next outbreaks. Just to make it clear, here's what your future looks like. I hope I'm wrong, but every state I've looked at this analysis has turned out to work. That's what you're looking at, which means, in fact, I said that COVID is making the only rules that matter. You're about to learn that, I suspect. Boy, how am I doing? I know I need to finish up fairly quickly here. I want to make a couple of comments very briefly. The first has to do with the way that you listen to evidence. We see people grabbing evidence here and there and everywhere saying, oh, gee, it's okay to open. It's okay to do this. It's okay to do that. There are things that we know. We know that children can and do spread this disease. We know that children can and are be super spreaders. We know that children, even if they do not become obviously ill, we don't know what the long-term consequences are, but we do know that even in asymptomatic cases, there are things going on that could present lifelong health impacts for children. So it is not safe to do this thing. With that said, where to go? I would love to spend length talking about what making distance learning really work looks like. I would like to talk at length about the evidence as to what COVID is actually doing. The long and the short of it, though, is that there is no way that anytime soon anybody in the nation is going to be safe to go back to any sort of face-to-face classes. If you do, it's going to be a train wreck, just like those train wrecks I was showing before. People are going to do something, it's going to blow up in their face, and they aren't even going to realize it for 2 weeks, by which time a tremendous amount of damage has been done. One thing that I would like to see people do is to start using the hashtag #MyCOVIDStory and tell your stories. Because I can talk about numbers all day long. Numbers do not sway hearts and minds. Personal stories do. Teachers, tell your story, hashtag #MyCOVIDStory. Nurses, tell your story, hashtag #MyCOVIDStory. Doctors, parents, patients, families. The world changed after hashtag #MeToo. The world changed after hashtag Black Lives Matter. The world needs to change after hashtag #MyCOVIDStory. Thank you very much. Let me see if I can give you your screen back here. Maybe, with luck. Did the same thing to me the other day. Okay.
Summer.
Oh, and if I could very briefly, I saw the letter from Richmond, and you guys deserve a huge shout out. That letter was phenomenal, fantastic. It belongs on every front page in the nation.
Okay, let's make this a little more personal. We're going to have you participate in an anonymous instant little poll here based on what we're seeing ourselves, based on what we're talking about here, and especially based on the prediction that Dr. Hester just gave us. Our question is, I want to hear from everyone here. Do you feel safe returning to campus during the COVID-19 pandemic? And a little poll is going to pop up. Go ahead and take this. It's anonymous. And we'll see the results. Give everybody a minute to jump in and do that. Should show up on your screen. Okay.
If you're on Facebook Live, you can answer this poll question in the comments.
Oh, wow. Okay, here are our results from people who are in the Zoom meeting. We can't see the Facebook Live right now, but it looks like 97% of the people say no. 3% of the people do feel safe. 97% say no, they do not. Let's go to our next slide. Oh, we need to take this off the screen, please. Take the results off. Okay. All right, our next question is actually two questions. We have another poll. Let's put this personal and hear the beginnings of your COVID story. Our two questions for this will be, do you know someone who has tested positive for COVID-19? And do you know someone who has died from COVID-19? Again, we'll give you a minute to do it here in the Zoom meeting and in the Facebook live stream. Everyone go ahead and participate, answer these two questions. In just a moment, we'll have a snapshot of how this has impacted us personally. Wow, this is much higher than I would hope for. 77% know someone who has tested positive, 23% don't. 38% know someone who has died, 62% don't. That's really upsetting. I'm going to go ahead and close this and we'll go to the next slide, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Corey Atkins, and I'm an English learner teacher with Richmond Public Schools. We've had an opportunity to hear about the science and data regarding COVID-19. So now we'd like to take a few minutes to hear how COVID has personally impacted our lives. I'd like to introduce Catherine Burke-Smart. Ms. Burke-Smart is a German language Ms. Burke-Smart is a German language teacher in Prince William County Public Schools. This week, she testified in front of the Prince William County School Board and shared her remarks on social media as well. She was also a featured guest speaker at Fairfax Education Association's virtual rally for PPE. Please welcome Ms. Burke-Smart.
Unmute me. Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here representing the amazing educators in the state of Virginia. I'm, like you said, I'm Catherine Burke-Smart. I'm a mom, I'm a teacher. I have two kids in the Prince William County schools, one a recent graduate and one a rising senior. My husband works in the city and I'm a teacher in the county. So we kind of replicate a lot of what you see in the Northern Virginia area. Recently, I recommended to our school board that at a minimum high school learning be conducted in a virtual environment for at least the fall semester. I didn't reach this decision lightly. I was one of the teachers who couldn't wait to get back to the classroom. I love my kids. They're like a family to me because I'm the only German teacher, so I see them all the way through high school. Their families become people that I know. This was really hard for me to decide. However, COVID came into my house. In June, my oldest son became infected with COVID-19. He was asymptomatic, my 19-year-old. He came home after a 3-day absence, spent about 30 minutes with the family and infected the rest of us, all three of us, in addition to him. Half a week passed before anybody had any symptoms. He was the first one who ended up getting tested because he found out that his coworker had tested positive. So we all did the same thing. When we did experience symptoms, they were horrifying. My 17-year-old experienced violent vomiting that was so harsh, his back seized up. He was disoriented and couldn't stand on his own. It's been almost 5 weeks and has really debilitating stomach issues that are not the result of live virus, but they have really wreaked havoc on his entire gastrointestinal system. He was previously healthy, 6'3" swimmer, and now he's lost probably 12 pounds. My husband and I had debilitating headaches, muscle aches, chills, hallucinations, dizziness. and extreme fatigue, incredible head pressure that made it impossible for me to open my eyes for 3 days. I laid in bed for 3 days and I needed help sitting up. Symptoms lasted a month for us. Many times my husband and I were not able to care for ourselves or for our kids, which makes me very grateful that my sons are teenagers. If I had younger children, I don't know what we would have done. So our COVID story raises a lot of issues. We live in Virginia. I live in Northern Virginia. All of our communities are enmeshed with each other. We have people who work in one county, live in another. It's impossible to extricate my vulnerability in the workplace from that of my husband or from my son when we go to different workplaces in the county. Our staff and our students don't live in vacuums. We have families for whom we must provide care and safety. And any students I interact with are automatically added to the risk that has to be borne by my family, by my husband, by my son. Some say young people might not become as ill as older people, but that's not always the case. My previously healthy son, like I said, is still experiencing long-term symptoms that are going to require a doctor's care for some time. Young people are extremely effective transporters of the disease because it just took one teenager in my family in a very small amount of time. Second, we hear that most people have mild symptoms. I cannot emphasize enough that mild is a relative concept. It only means that symptoms don't require hospital admission. While we were sick, we had 4 terrifying trips to the ER, 2 separate doctor's visits, and several conversations between my husband and me about whether or not we were going to need to sign do not resuscitate orders if I ended up back in the hospital. Our cases are considered mild. We were wildly, viciously sick, but we had mild symptoms because we weren't hospitalized. The potential risks, short-term and long-term, to other people who might not be as lucky is unfathomable to me. Third, and this I say as a teacher, nobody in my family ever had a fever that reached 99 degrees. This is a basic triage method for detecting illness, but if the 4 of us had been students in Northern Virginia schools, it would have taken half a week before our symptoms were noticeable enough for a teacher or somebody else to say, hey, it's time to get tested. And that, I have to say too, this was a month ago. Testing was a lot easier to come by then than it is now. And we're not a spiking state. So if I can't get tested with no symptoms, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to replicate or fix that for schools. Even limiting daily student numbers in a Northern Virginia high school puts more than 1,000 students in facilities at a time. Most importantly, there's no ability to rotate faculty. Teachers and support staff are going to be in the building every single day, nearly every day, which means they won't benefit from the impact of minimizing populations. This is an unacceptable risk to the teachers that I work with who love their jobs, but also love to be able to provide for their families and not die by going to work. The community impact of lost work time is also enormous. My husband, sons, and I have been have not been capable of working for a month. That means 4 employers have lost productivity for half the summer. Extrapolating this to a school environment nearly guarantees disruption in countless other workplaces. Finally, none of the doctors that we have spoken to, and it's been a lot, can tell us whether we're now immune from the virus, how immune, and for how long. The clock is ticking on my family's vulnerability again, and it's a terrifying sound. My son, who's going to be a senior, doesn't feel comfortable going to in-person learning and has elected to do virtual learning for his senior year of high school. We're at Woodbridge. It's a fabulous school. We love it. And for my son to make that decision grieves him, but he's more terrified of getting sick again, potentially worse next time, or passing it on to somebody than he is about missing a senior year. And speak volumes. Excuse me, my family's not a theoretical concept. COVID invaded our house. It was ruthless, it was vicious, and it was thorough, and it didn't leave until it was ready to go. Our school districts cannot knowingly put families through the same horror. Sorry, I urge you to consider all virtual education so that no teacher, staff member, or student can go back into school until it's safe. Thank you so much again.
And thank you very much, Ms. Burksmart. And we're glad you and your family are here to tell this story. Our next speaker is Sonia Smith. Ms. Smith is the president of the Chesterfield Education Association. She is also the outgoing member of the Virginia Education Association Board of Directors and continues to serve on the VEA and NEA's Resolutions Committee. Ms. Smith?
Good evening, sisters and brothers. My name is Sonia Smith, and I'm so thankful to be here in this space with all of you all. Thank you, Dr. Hester, and thank you, Catherine, for your amazing, amazing testimony. You are so brave, and I'm so prayerful for your family. Question that was asked of me was to talk about some of the tactics, strategies that we've been using in Chesterfield County to get the word out, to get people comfortable enough to share what they've been going through during the stay-at-home order and the slow opening here in Virginia. So one of the first things that I want to share with you all is that we have an organizing committee with the Chesterfield Education Association that is actually led by Christine Melendez, that many of you are familiar with. And once we went on the stay-at-home order, the organizing committee got together and began to have weekly meet and confer conferencing with the superintendent's cabinet. So that's the deputy superintendent, chief of schools, chief academic officer, the director for special education, and anyone else that we needed to get onto that call. And of course, it's a Zoom call. And just simply fielding questions from rank and file members, non-members, anyone that had a question about what the plan was while we were in a virtual space, because there were still so many unknowns leading up to the close of the school year with respect to grading and that type of thing. So we weren't even thinking about what it was going to look like moving into the new school year. But flash forward, we, through our UNICEF director, through Karen Oliveris, and the help of a platform called Action Network, we put out a newsletter to every single employee that is not a member of the Chesterfield Education Association through their school emails. And we basically had we had a lot of feedback from that. So we began to expand our network. From there, I started what's called Facebook Fridays, and you guys can tune in on the CEA Facebook page. And it's just allowing people to share their questions, and I'm answering them real time. And it's just letting people know that they're not alone and that it's okay. We did partner with Richmond Education Association with a statement for what reopening of schools should look like. And so my refrain has been, and a lot of people want this on a t-shirt now, I am not Notorious B.I.G. and I am not ready to die. And so that is something that people need to take heed to. Our school divisions needs to slow down. Our governor needs to stop being pressured politically and look at what's really going on. And so actually the last thing that's going to happen is that the organizing committee is looking to meet again this week to actually begin to put more pressure on our school board and board of supervisors. So thank you all for your time. And I'm just so happy to be in this space with you all. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, for your powerful words. And next slide, please. So given all of this information that you have, COVID-19 unknowns, the realities of schools, and we know what those realities are: lack of funds, lack of testing and tracing, and the data lags as explained by Dr. Hester. What impacts will these have on your district? At this time, we're going to take a break for 2 minutes, giving you a moment to reflect, take a restroom break, or just breathe. We do ask that you share your thoughts, comments, and concerns in the chat. We'll see you back in 2 minutes.
Those of you watching on Facebook Live, we are taking a break. We will be back on in about 1 minute. Corey?
Great. Now, in reading a few of these comments, it's clear that all of these issues must now have educator-developed, fact-driven, and science-based campus opening guidelines. Next slide. At this time, I take honor in presenting Dr. Melandra Coleman. Dr. Coleman is a third-generation educator who has been teaching for the past 16 years. She holds an AB in political science from Duke University, has earned 5 advanced degrees, and is the author of 5 books. Dr. Coleman?
Thank you. It's just not safe. It's just not safe. It's just not safe. As a 16-year veteran teacher, I absolutely love my students and the work that I've been doing for the past 16 years. The energy we share in the classroom charges and energizes me and grows, challenges and energizes and pushes my young people. Teaching our youth is a great honor, but being in the physical classroom right now, well, that's just not safe. When I think about transportation, temperature checks, change of classes, classroom space, morning intake, the way the little ones and the bigger ones love to cling to their teachers, breakfast, lunch, students trying to keep up with what days they attend school. I just can't see any safe way for students to return to school in September. And this is compounded by conversations I've been having with some of my students and some parents. They are simply afraid of returning to having in-person school this fall. Why are they afraid? Because they think it's just not safe. But I would never come before you or any group with all issues, all problems, and no solutions. That being said, I think that school districts across the Commonwealth need to settle on a decision as soon as is reasonably possible. And since safety is paramount for students, staff, and families, I wholeheartedly believe, and I'm honored that the Richmond Education Association released a powerful statement this past Thursday saying the same. I believe that virtual school is our best option. Anything else is just not safe. And once we settle on the fact that virtual school is the answer for this season, we will finally be able to devote all of our energy to creating a plan that will benefit all stakeholders. In this plan, we will, among other things, with the help of teachers, staff, community members, school boards, city councils, and boards of supervisors, develop and create strategies to best help our working parents, because we love our parents. Number 2, we will help construct the best virtual plan for every age group and every grade level. 3, we will push for top-notch training so that teachers, low-tech savvy to high-tech savvy, will be ready on day 1 to instruct from a virtual platform. And 4, the REA will be hosting a Know Your Rights town hall where members will be able to share their thoughts and concerns and hear from medical professionals and the VA legal division for issues that fall into those categories. In closing, in the words of a personal friend in Fairfax, UD, we want to live. You want to live. I want to live. We want to live to teach, to instruct, to educate another day. Anything other than virtual instruction, virtual school right now, it's just not safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Thank you for your thoughtful and your passionate words. We have Kimberly Adams as our final guest speaker. She has over 21 years of teaching experience and is the president of the Fairfax Education Association, FEA. FEA and other unions in their district have been working diligently in order to support and advocate for teacher and student safety. I look forward to hearing from President Adams and having her passionate support filter into our own districts and communities. I'm sure you'll be excited to learn how her advocacy for Fairfax can parallel the advocacy in other districts as well. President Adams.
There we go. Thank you very much. And unfortunately, I have to follow Dr. Coleman. She just got everybody going. And now I have to be the one to say, oh my goodness, our school system cannot get its act together. Our school board are fractured on whether they think the best option is in-person instruction or virtual instruction. Our superintendent, of course, feels committed to moving forward on in-person instruction. Our educators are scared to return to the classroom. The survey data so far shows about a 50% number of teachers applying for the virtual option, and more than 66% of parents applying for the in-person option. So the discrepancy will be at least 15% at this point between where our educators are and where our students are. We have over 188,000 students in Fairfax County. And our superintendent recently said that in order for us to service all students, like I don't even think she's Dr. DeVos, Betsy DeVos believes we need 5 more Pentagon-sized buildings to house all of our students full-time to get this social distancing done. Unfortunately, Fairfax County's task force has pushed forward a model of hybrid instruction that they are completely bent on making happen in the fall, not a virtual option for all. The FEA has spoken up and mentioned that we have hundreds of questions. We've sent them hundreds of questions that are still unanswered. Unfortunately, the school board still has questions that are unanswered. Now they've delayed the start of school to September 8th. So that is a 2-week delay from the original August 24th start date. We have worked really hard and come together with the 3 unions to represent educators in Fairfax. Unfortunately, recently the collaboration has fractured somewhat because the AFT National has decided to break away from our coalition. They've asked their local FCFT to stand down from the coalition. But as a coalition at the very beginning, we did host a town hall with many folks to speak out on what we believe to be virtual as the best option. We've worked on a letter that's been sent to over 562 times to all of our elected officials and our superintendent and the state superintendent of instruction, Dr. James Lane, requiring that these questions be answered before school is reopened. And we have held rallies of our members as recently as this past Friday to stand together and share the evidence. We were proud to have a pediatrician, Dr. John Farrell, speak. He's from Loudoun, and he's also based in Fairfax, originally from Fairfax. So to give the data and evidence about why it may not be safe for students, and especially not for adults in our buildings. So ventilation remains a huge issue even right now for the staff who are working in Fairfax County, office staff, maintenance staff, custodial staff, all feeling the pressure of HVAC systems that are inadequate while they are doing their work currently and wearing masks and other gear. We just don't have it together for our students and families. It is truly not safe yet.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, President Adams, for sharing that with us and for taking the time and sharing all the hard work you've done with FEA and your other organizations to advocate for student and teacher safety in the fall. We really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today, all of our speakers as well. Really quickly, I'm going to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Alden Blevins. I'm a music educator from a rural county that is adjacent to Richmond. And I am here today to kind of set us up and help facilitate the breakout room portion of our town hall. This is your chance to get to connect with other educators and share your story and feelings, like I know you have been in the chat, on these important issues. We would like this to remain as safe a space as possible for everyone so that you can connect. Please remember to stay respectful and be mindful of the time it may take for all who are present to share. All right, we can go ahead and go to next slide. Moving into the logistics, I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to the chat window. In just a moment, you will find a link to a Google folder. Please go ahead and open that folder. You will be put into a breakout room using a number 1 through 30. You're going to want to go ahead and open this link before we go into those breakout rooms, or you will lose access to the link that's in the chat. So make sure you're opening that Google folder right now. You will know your number as soon as you are in your room so that you can go ahead and select the correct Google Doc with the corresponding breakout room number for you guys to take your notes. Once you're in the room, the first step would be to quickly introduce yourself, assign the key roles. Don't worry, those roles will be there in the slide for you to remember, and get ready to discuss the 2 main questions. Let's go to the next slide so that we can see our 2 main questions. All right, our 2 main questions. Question 1, what are your local and state elected officials, school divisions, or unions doing to facilitate your schools opening safely this fall? I've been hearing a lot in the chat already, and I know that will be a great question for you guys to go ahead and share about. For your second question, the big one, what collective actions do you believe that VEU, all of us, should facilitate to ensure a safe return for our students in the fall? It's the big important one. Don't try to keep those 2 questions in your brain or go ahead and write them down, because they will be in the Google Doc for you. And one last logistical thing before we do go ahead and break apart. There is one more kind of fun component we put together. We used our teacher brains to kind of come up with a way to make this interactive for you guys. So after you go ahead and have your discussion in your breakout room, we're asking you to synthesize your action ideas from question number 2 into a Jamboard. And I believe right now, yep, this is what our Jamboard looks like for those of you who've never used one before. It's basically kind of like a collaborative Google slide, except it has a really cool function with some sticky notes. So if you go over to the left-hand side, if you could cursor over to it, there is on that left bar of tools an option to go ahead and add a sticky note. When you're in your breakout rooms, you will have a link in the Google Docs to this Jamboard where you can add your action ideas so that when we come back, we can look at all of our ideas together and see what actions we're thinking about taking next. Make sure you've got that folder open so that you have the links to the Google Docs. And now we're going to go ahead and break apart into our breakout rooms.
Hi, everyone. This is Deanna Fierro. I am the Virginia Educators United Tech Head. So I am the one leading our slides right now. If you would like to participate, if you are a Facebook viewer and you would like to participate in the Jamboard activity, I am dropping that link into the comments now for our live viewers. Please remember that we are trying to answer 2 questions that were presented earlier, and I will bring those 2 questions up. Here are your 2 questions. For those of you who are viewing on Facebook, if you would like to participate in the Jamboard activity, while all other Zoom members are in the breakout rooms, please do that now. Thank you to everyone as well for coming today, for listening to our speakers, for sharing the word. If you would like to use the only when it's safe Facebook profile frame, remember you can do that to share the word as well. Once again, I'm Deanna Fierro. I'm our Virginia Educators United Tech Support. If you would like to answer these questions, if you are a viewer on Facebook Live, you can either participate in the Jamboard activity, or you can answer these questions in the comments of our Facebook live stream. Thank you again to all of our Facebook Live viewers. We have about 10 minutes left for the breakout rooms to come back to the main room. If you are participating now, and if you have been watching our presentation up to this moment and you agree with what you have heard so far, and you would like to sign the petition that we have created, I am dropping that link into our comments now. If you have not followed us on Twitter, you can find us on Twitter as Virginia Educators United. And if you have not visited our website yet and signed up for our mailing list, please do so. It is virginiaeducatorsunited.com. Those of you who would like to participate in the Jamboard activity, let me go ahead and drop that link into the comments now. For the Jamboard activity, we would ask that you try to answer question 2, and on a sticky note, place an action that you are confident that you can accomplish, or you can rally other members of your communities to help you accomplish, in order to make sure that we have a safe reopening of our schools in Virginia. Thank you again to everyone who is joining in to our Safe Return to School Town Hall. I'm Deanna Fierro, and I am our Virginia Educators United Tech representative. If you would like to participate in the activity that is happening now in our Zoom breakout rooms, I am dropping the link one more time into the comments feed where you can participate in the Jamboard activity. In the Jamboard activity, please focus more on question number 2, where you will post an action that you feel confident you can try to accomplish or rally other members of your community towards accomplishing to ensure that we have a safe reopening of our schools. Thank you to everyone who's already started to post their action to our Jamboard. We have about 5 minutes before the breakout rooms close and everyone returns to the main room. If you're a Facebook viewer at this time, you can also participate in the Jamboard activity. The link can be found in the comments section of our Facebook live feed. If you'd also like to take this minute to step away from your computer and take a break and come back, we will still be here. We apologize for those of you who cannot enter the Jamboard at this time. Please note that you can always come back as soon as some of the members exit the Jamboard. If you are in the Jamboard now and you have posted your comment and you are done, please return to the Facebook live feed so that other members in the Facebook live feed can participate in the Jamboard activity. If you have not signed the petition for Virginia Educators United, only when it's safe, Virginia School Reopening 2020, please do so. And I will be dropping the link for our petition into the Facebook comments at this time now. Thank you again to everybody who is watching our Facebook Live feed. We have about 2 minutes before the breakout rooms close. I'm Deanna Fierro, and I'm a Virginia educator in the Richmond region, and I'm also a member of Virginia Educators United. If you have already posted your sticky note on the Jamboard answering question number 2, which is what actions do you believe that you can take to ensure that we have a safe reopening of schools? Or what action do you think you can rally other members of your community to ensure that we have a safe reopening of schools? Please put some of those action ideas onto the Jamboard now. Once you've posted your idea, please exit the Jamboard so that other members participating both in the Zoom meeting and on Facebook Live can post their idea next. We have 1 minute left till the breakout rooms close. Thank you to everybody who is a viewer on Facebook Live for participating in the Jamboard activity. At this time, could you please exit the Jamboard activity and return to the Facebook Live feed for other members to participate, especially our members who are in the breakout rooms and will be posting their own comments soon.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a pretty amazing collection of ideas as we come together on what is the things that you guys recommend as far as statewide actions and steps. So thank you. I'm Carla Okuchi. I'm a union leader here in Fairfax, as well as connected with VEU and National Educators United. And so I'm thrilled that everyone is here in this space. I know we've heard some pretty amazing speakers. I hope it makes you think about our role as education professionals and what we truly need for our students and really the community at large to do what we do best, but in kind of a virtual environment, which we know is the safest at this moment in time. I know for those of you who are NEA members, you know, we've got the HEROES Act and we're trying to get that pushed forward so that the funding is there to get all the items that would need to be in place for us to even consider opening our doors. And we talked about, you know, the HVAC concerns. We've seen the studies about airflow and how this is an aerosolized virus. So I'm just waiting for Deanna. You got the Jamboard still kind of going and we'll capture that. But who are
we want to give 1 minute or so
Yeah.
to the people who have not posted because we have a lot of people on Facebook Live.
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about National Educators United as we kind of wait. We are a grassroots group of educators and allied stakeholders. We've organized to achieve its vision through a variety of actions. And so what we are seeking is to unite across unions, our caucuses and our uniteds, our core teams and other grass networks as a collective group of educators to build a national movement, build capacity for collective action in our different states and local contexts to meet our demands. We are assisting each other in learning how to be more effective in organizing. We are pushing education to the forefront of a national conversation, and certainly during the time of COVID-19, we are instrumental in that. So,
Carla, before we go to the next slide, I just want to let participants that the Jamboard is pretty full at this moment, which is great. So if you do not get to post your comment at this time, please come back at another time when there are less participants and you can do that.
great. Thank you guys for utilizing that tool and sharing with us your ideas. And when we get together again, we'll kind of share with you what it looks like statewide. So we'll go back to our slides. And I just gave you a little bit of information about National Educators United. We're glad you found Virginia Educators United. We are your statewide group, and we invite you to join National Educators United. You can find our Facebook page. We've been doing these town halls for several months now. We've been conducting conversations around Black Lives Matter, austerity, and then certainly the most popular is our return to schools and that conversation happening nationwide. So we invite you to check us out and attend some of the discussions and planning that we will need to happen all across the United States. Next slide. I have been working diligently with our return to school team. This group has done a lot of research. And so you can see our NEU statement. You can certainly have access to the pledge and some model language for any union resolutions you would like to take back to your local area. And so you will have access to all of the work and tools that we have kind of gathered as we face COVID-19. You can kind of see these are the 6 criteria we're looking for before we even consider returning to our buildings. So you can see since the pandemic, we're coming together, kind of setting that broad expectation. It is very important that you as educators are the ones who set these in place because it impacts all of us, our students and our personal families, their families. And so those who are setting these policies for our schools are not educators themselves. So our voices must come together and be heard by our unions and by the policymakers. It is important that we stand together and that we stand firm as educators to ensure the health and safety of everyone in our communities. And I love how Dr. Melandra Coleman said, it's not safe, which is why we're using only when it's safe as our hashtag. We all want things to return to normal, as you heard Dr. Hester say. That is a distant memory. We will not have normal as we once experienced it. So as long as COVID-19 is here, existing in our state, our counties, and our local areas, things will not be normal. Recognizing that will not be normal for quite some time, we have put together, like I said, these expectations that we believe are necessary before opening our doors. Next slide. And then when you click on this, you'll get all of this information. You can open up our organizing tools and have access to it so that you too could take action in your areas of Virginia. Next slide. Now let Emma take it away. Go ahead, Emma.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So we want to talk about taking action from this point forward. We have very little turnaround time on this. So to make our voices heard, as bland as this may seem, contacting all of our leadership, flooding them with emails and phone calls is really, really important. So there should be, if you click in the on the PowerPoint, you can access that petition, but we can also see if somebody can, one of our other organizers can post that link in the chat as well. So this petition is something that we're launching statewide. We know there have been a lot of local petitions. And we would like to add another one to the list of one that has statewide spread. So we'll make sure we get that to you if we're having technical difficulties. You will have access to the PowerPoint, and there we go. So there's the petition link in the chat now. So emailing and calling your local and state leaders, as well as the governor, our state superintendent of schools, Dr. James Lane, and Secretary of Education, Atif Karni. So the contact information for those three are located on the right-hand side. And you can use your local government website for contacting your local leaders. You can also use Virginia Public Access Project to contact people as well. All right, next slide. Okay, so another thing that we want to do both for organizing around reopening and for the broader fight for our schools is to create contact action teams. So what this means is that we want people who are in the same area to be able to connect with one another. So if you go to that link, which when you have the PowerPoint yourself, you can click on that link, you fill out the form, and then it's going to create a spreadsheet that we can all look at that shows names and contact information for people in our area. So, you know, if you were on this call and let's say you're from Charlottesville and there are a bunch of other people on here from Charlottesville, you want to be able to get in touch with them. If you guys fill this out, you'll be able to see that contact information so that you can start possibly a chat thread with them or an email chain and start organizing. We also encourage everybody to use the Only When It's Safe Facebook profile frame just to show widespread solidarity on the issue. And you can print and mail postcards to your local and state elected officials. So not only are they getting the message through their email inbox and their phone, but they're also getting it in the form of actual postcards. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's the big question. We as Virginia Educators United, we started 2 years ago with the march, with a 4,000 person march on the Capitol. And it was a huge effort and it was a huge amount of participation. And ultimately, it resulted in very little change in terms of actual policy. And so what we know now is that for us to create long-term change in our state for our schools, we have to have the power in our hands. And power means that we are connected to one another and we stand in solidarity with one another. We're communicating and we're able to do collective actions. So that's all about building union power. We want people to join your locals, get involved. We want to move our union to be more committed to these actions that show this kind of power. But that means we've got to step in and do the work together. And we want to push for our state to start prioritizing the people who live here over profit. Because the reason that we are in this situation is because we have defunded not only our schools, but defunded our communities. We haven't been able to get a living wage for years. We haven't been able to create a situation where, people should not be depending on schools for meals. They should be able to afford them, but we don't have high paying jobs here that allow people the income that they need, the healthcare that they need. And so we're going to be urging our elected leaders to make the right choice here. But if they don't, we need to build the kind of power to force them to make the right choice. So this is an anonymous poll question, but we just want to know if it comes down to it and our voices aren't listened to, and other educators were willing to stand with you in doing so, would you participate in a sick out, a walkout, or a strike? Now, I know that this is tough because we hear things that striking is illegal in Virginia. We hear that we're a right to work state. A lot of people don't even believe that we have unions here, but we do have unions. Right to work means you can't be compelled to join the union, but it doesn't mean that the union's not there. And in terms of the legality of striking, it's important for us to remember that the concept of a strike is that so many people participate that they're not able to fire anyone, because all you have to do is commit to the idea that we do it together, and that if they try to create any type of punishment for people on the other end, we walk out again because we're in solidarity with one another. So many of the states that have done strikes, school strikes, striking was illegal there too, but not only was nobody punished, they won huge gains for their students and for themselves. With that said, we definitely know that this would need a lot more questions and a lot more conversation. But if you can please go ahead and just share your thoughts to that poll question.
$20 seconds to get your vote in. Thank you for participating.
So that's what it is. 90% of us would stand with each other. And it's so tough because that I saw in the chat some people saying like, I would if others did. And that's the thing. It's this, catch-22 where it's like, if we're all in it together, then we all feel comfortable being in it together. We all feel confident in what we're doing. This shows us, if you have any uncertainty that you would have anybody behind you, if you took a stand, we would have 90% of us. And that's before we've even done any organizing to build confidence, to build structures, to build funds, to protect people, to do all of that groundwork to pull something off successfully. Already 90% of us would stand together. So I'm going to re-emphasize only when it's safe. We are taking what is a hardline stance, but is really just the most reasonable and rational thing that we can do, and what it is our responsibility to do as teachers who are responsible for our own health and the health of our children. We are not going to send our children and our educators back to school campuses until we have 24 days of a consistent decline in new COVID-19 cases, and until we have fully funded reopening plans, meaning that we know we can go back to school and not just create another spike. Know that we can go back and have what we need to stay safe. Until then, we will continue 100% continued distance learning and continue, fighting for the type of education that our kids deserve, fighting for the financial support that their families need to pull this off. And it's simply the right thing to do. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide if we have one more. Yeah, so this is just the beginning, this conversation. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done to continue the communication and to build the power that we need to have in our back pocket should it be necessary. So if you want to connect with us, you can join our Facebook group, our Twitter feed, visit our website and subscribe to our mailing list. We don't bombard you with a ton of emails, but it is a way for us to put out an action call when we have something we're planning to do or when we have crucial information to share. So these are all the ways that we can connect.
That is it. Thank you for everyone who has participated tonight. The Facebook video will be saved and easily accessible and shareable to other people in the community. Thank you and good night.